Chapter 46. Our positions in life shift like a pack of cards, quickly shuffled. And just as we think we know where we stand, we are reshuffled. We returned home without him. Over time, she felt anger and a sense of betrayal, a series of emotions moving from one stage to the next, till life-saving, coping strategies took hold, and finally all that remained was the pain of sweet memories and the long, lonely years ahead. As for me, I grow and move forward in time and past the point of his age, so that I am even older now than he was then. A strange feeling, because he is my father and I am the child. Etched in my memory at that point of his departure, he lives out those aspects of his life that touched mine. Unwilling to let go, I flicked through the pages of this album over and over again, where the pictures are real and alive. Confusing images flit in and out, attempting to create a cohesive pattern. I sometimes even now dream that he returns, that he had simply gone away on a business trip, and we hadn't realized it, and the joy I feel is similar to what I felt when he had once before gone to Rangoon. A few days later, as we ran along the shortcut across the Ponji Chao on our way home from school, I imagined that he had arrived home and yelling out to the others, "Daddy's home!" I raced ahead of the others. To my surprise, I found him actually there and rushed into his outstretched arms. I see my father in my mind's eye at Maghrib, standing on the Janamaz, his dignified profile silhouetted against the twilight that entered the room from the window that faced the back of the house where the mango tree that never bore any fruit grew. I recall the sound of his voice in the early morning as he recited in soft rhythmic tones passages from the Quran, which he would have propped up on a pillow before him as he sat on his bed. On Fridays, he used to take the short walk to the mosque he had had built many years before the war. It stood across the street from the Burmese government school, and here lived the Maulvi, who unfortunately had very different views from that of my father, and in particular disapproved of my father educating his daughters. In his interpretation, sending girls to school was forbidden in Islam. My father, on the other hand, considered educating his daughters as important as educating his sons. Music to the Maulvi was also taboo, and he harbored many archaic views about several things. Our home was the first to have a telephone, and when the new moon was sighted in Rangoon, we received a call on the phone from a family friend telling us that it would be Eid the next day. The Maulvi claimed that the phone was the voice and invention of the devil, and refused to announce to the Muslim community that the new moon had been witnessed and therefore Eid could be celebrated the next day. He remained adamant till the end of his life that the earth was flat and argued vehemently with anyone who thought otherwise. Many years later, young Muslim men from the University of Rangoon who arrived in Kalor for the summer holidays got a kick out of arguing with him about this and laughed at his expression when they told him that people had even landed on the moon. Ironically, almost a century later, when it is scientifically simple to predict the exact date of the new moon, and when humans have even landed on the moon, there is still debate and controversy among various groups of Muslims about the date of Eid, so that not all Muslims celebrate Eid on the same day. We had a large radio, and we would turn the knobs, struggling to tune into a station, and when we were finally able to do so, we listened with interest to highly static broadcasts. How funny I thought my father was when he sang a few lines from a song that he had heard on the radio about a tap that went drip, drip, drip. Then one day he returned from a trip to Rangoon with a big black gramophone and a bunch of records, each of which had a picture of a dog sitting beside a large loudspeaker encircled by the words, "His Master's Voice." We placed a disc on the turntable, wound the handle, and gently placed the needle onto a record of our choice. Music filled the air as we listened to Saigal singing Diya Jala O Jagamag Jagamag, and also some Western music like the Beverly Sisters singing Roll Out the Barrel, which made me envision a group of girls standing at the top of a hill, rolling a large barrel down a hill. The only kind of barrels we knew were the giant petrol drums, a relic of the war. The favorite gramophone record of my sister Dolly and myself was Give Me My Ranch and My Saddle, to which we would perform a special skit. We would drape sheets over our shoulders so that they reached down to the floor, and then, holding a long bamboo stick in our right hands like a sword, we would rush at each other diagonally across the floor from opposite corners of the room and clash our sticks. We had no idea what a ranch was or a saddle, nor did we have any idea of what a cowboy was, but the music suggested to us some sort of battle. Close to the front gate at the end of the garden grew 2 tall apple trees, which between them produced 1 small apple a year, and a plum tree that bore no plums, but a weaver bird nest that clung upended on one of its overhanging branches. There was also a lone papaya tree in the corner that grew tall and straight, its trunk scarred at even intervals, all the way to the top, where it burst into a spiral of huge leaves that resembled green hands with fingers extended generously in giving. This tree also only produced a few green papayas which clustered around its very top, and to dislodge these we needed long bamboo poles. Rather than waiting for the fruit to ripen, we brought them down when they were raw. They were then peeled and, when cut in half, fell apart to expose pale green bowls with tiny white pearl-like seeds clinging to the interior. These seeds were scooped out and discarded, and the flesh of the fruit was grated to be used as one of the major ingredients in a Burmese salad, letho, or used as a tenderizer in various meat dishes. As if to make up for this lack of produce of the trees around the house, my father bore abundant fruit, 15 children in all. By the age of 32, he had 6 from his first wife. He then married my mother, who would rather have gone to school and become a doctor, but instead bore him 9 children. I was the 6th in line of the second batch of 9, and 12th down the row of the entire team. Of course, by the time I was born, the older ones of the first family and my first mother, whom I suppose I should classify as my stepmother, and who was also my second cousin, had moved back to live in the extended family and community in Kotor. Kotor was a small town close to Surat in India, so I never really saw any of them except for the eldest, Ahmed, who, when I met him many years later, was probably 50 years old and an almost identical image of my father. Chapter 47. It rains and rains again, while we children whisper at Maghrib and say, "Shh, Daddy's praying," our minds still enmeshed in secure, captured moments of a previous time. And the dark green leaves on the tall mango tree that stands behind the house, facing my parents' bedroom window, glisten and drip teardrops of silver rain as I stand beside my mother, each of us on our rectangle of janamaz, and bow down to the will of Allah, me, not yet bewildered, and she? Heavy drops of rain come dinning down on the zinc sheets of the roof, and a dampness permeates the air. Moisture seeps up through the concrete floor of the living room, leaving a damp film that sticks to our feet. Dead earthworms litter the red earth on either side of the paved road, under the cherry trees that had blushed pink against blue skies earlier in the year. We squelch our way to school along the shortcut, past the tennis court, and around the little hillock where the two young lovers had moved on quickly to another reincarnation. The cuckoo's call seems melancholy and misplaced. Even the pigeons in the rafters that had cooed lovingly to each other now sound more like mourning doves lamenting. The sky hung low, a sliver of blue slip showing along its hem. The sun pushed its light through the gray in patches of light now and then, as the wind in the higher reaches of the heavens whipped the clouds undecidedly. She awoke at that point between sleep and wakefulness, where conflicting realities allow people's thoughts to invade consciousness, and strange images emerge and disappear before closed eyes. The morning filtered in through the square panes of the window in their bedroom. She listened for his breathing and reached out to touch him, and the resounding thud of her heart against the hollowness within her manifested itself as pain, physical pain that made tangible the grief that had a source, a point, a location, whereas the emotional pain of loss seemed to center itself in a vague spot where no analgesic could reach. Yet, creeping into her mind like an unwanted outsider was gratitude. Gratitude for the pain that was a measure of the connection she had been fortunate to have had with him. Her waking and dreaming merged into one inchoate whole. She was swept up and out toward that horizon where sunrise and sunset meld into one holographic image until the trend of dreams is finally broken by the harsh reality of light. This loss on the one hand, and on the other the children, 9 of them. There was little time to grieve, yet there was the sense of falling into an abysmal darkness and not having the strength to even reach out at weak handholds for support. Then the mind, struggling against the falling, striving to find solutions, to fend off the battalion of obstacles to survival, not for herself, but for her children. The baby, not quite walking yet, the oldest not yet a man, 5 daughters, the older 2 still teenagers. And then the evening, an ending, not quite, of things over, and it's too late to bring back the day that's gone forever. And the night, a flurry of forgotten dreams and half-dreamed dreams, an interspersing of reality and unreality, and a preference to cling to frantic hope that it was all just a nightmare. At times, the blanking out to a point of numbness, when she would remember that she had thought of something, but with only the memory of the thought, bereft of meaning remaining. It was too sudden, gone at the age of 52, within 3 days with no warning, with no time to prepare, at that stage of life where the future seems to extend into forever, and having the knowledge that death is real, but happens to other people, not to her or hers. The life insurance policy had been cancelled because a Maulvi had advised him that it was not permitted in Islam. Uninformed of his business affairs and with no idea of their finances, she was left with only the money and jewelry that remained in the safe. The heavy metal safe stood in the heart of the house, that small enclosed room which was always in semi-light and from which radiated the doors to the dining room, the living room, and the solid teak stairway that ran up a few steps and then angled into a longer series of steps to the large hallway upstairs, around which the bedrooms were located. It was in this large hallway upstairs that we had one day danced to music playing on records that spun swiftly round and round on the gramophone. Eunice, who had learned to dance from her modernized cousins in Rangoon, taught me how to waltz, while I tried not to trip over my long nightgown and kept looking down at my feet the whole time to avoid treading on his toes. There were those who owed my father considerable sums of money, business transactions that had taken place earlier in the form of unwritten and unsigned contracts. Those involved now sat quiet, happy in my mother's ignorance of who the clients were. She went down into the dark enclosed space at the foot of the stairs and, opening the safe, reached in and drew out her jewelry, which she had never cared much to wear, and soon ruby and emerald necklaces, gold bangles, earrings, and bracelets rapidly disappeared over the fence sold by the Chinese lady next door. A few days after my father passed away, Mr. Dantra, the Parsi gentleman who lived at the top of the hill, came by our house. He was very much an Englishman in the way he dressed, with short khaki pants and white shirt. He also wore knee-high socks, a solar topi, a pith helmet, and invariably held a walking stick in his hand. As he entered the living room, he said reproachfully to me in the manner of those who blame the departed for dying on them, I told him to play tennis and go for walks.